Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Press Break podcast. I'm Chelsea Late, joined by Jamie and Tyler, of course, and we are back with more March Madness. Madness, sadness, kind of the vibe today. So welcome back. Let's just start by hitting on our March Madness bracket group. We have, I believe we're at 175 people who have put their brackets in our group, which is wild. So thank you for joining that. We'll give a fun little recap. Currently, right now, the bracket in first place, solely in first place, is Artsy Girls Pick 6. So shout out to you if you're listening. And then in terms of where we are all sitting,
you can skip that part.
No, I'm gonna hit it. Currently, the person out of the four of us who is in the lead is our producer, Brian. He is in 69th place right now, so shout out to him. Me and Tyler are currently tied for 132nd. So shout out us. And then Jamie is pulling up the rear at 156. Shout out Jamie.
When you are as psychotically competitive as I am, you have to approach it so unseriously, or else it gets really painful. So
y'all,
I made one bracket this year, like only one bracket, and so but because of that, I didn't make like a head and a heart bracket. So there's parts of my bracket that did really well. Where I was like, okay, I know some ball. I mean, there's some other parts like Vandy into the Elite Eight where I used my heart. And it didn't go so well, you know. But I'm okay to live with that. I'm okay.
See, that's why you make a good bracket, which is the one in our group, and then I also made a Delulu bracket where I had Michigan winning it all. So you know what?
Yeah,
that's why you make two brackets. Anyway,
that sounds suspiciously like my one bracket.
Yeah. Anyways, shout out to the Delulu brackets everywhere. But that is it for our little bracket recap. Make sure to keep up on that because we'll see which one of us loses. Right now it looks like Jamie might be the one.
Very likely.
But heading into more March Madness talk, the first two rounds are behind us. We're headed into the Sweet 16. We're also headed to neutral sites now. And so we're just going to very briefly recap the first two rounds by each picking a player that we thought kind of showed out for their team. And we'll start with Jamie just to kind of kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go with, I think, someone who is flying really under the radar in a lot of ways due to the fact that she was injured for a chunk of this season. And that's Sarah Ashley Barker for Alabama. Delivered the best game of the tournament by far in the double overtime Alabama-Maryland matchup. Maryland this time pulled it out. My husband sent me a social media comment that said, if I had a nickel for every time Maryland coughed up a double-digit lead while an opposing player had a career-high 40-plus points, ... please just don't lose this one, Maryland. And a team that wears red and all that. So, you know, there was a little bit of BTSD, but also my little side note to that is Allie Kubek, Miss March for Maryland, she shows up ready. But Sarah Ashley Barker, I mean, she laid it all out there for the Tide. Really, really did everything she could for them. 45 points on 17 of 25 shooting, was 4 of 6 from 3, had 8 boards, had 3 assists, had 3 steals. She did a little bit of everything. She played 49 out of 50 minutes. This season, she's been shooting over 50%. She averages over 18 points a game, over 6 rebounds, very nearly 4 assists. I saw people talk about, man, I hope she gets a training camp invite. To me, that is a draft player. That is a draft player to me.
100%.
And it is not a question, especially in a draft where you're not really looking for stars. Most teams kind of have their core together. You're looking for players that are going to be able to fill a role, and especially ones that you're getting under this current CBA. You want people that can fit into a lot of different sort of spots, and I think that, especially with her height, with her ability to play defense, that's Sarah Ashley Barker. So Obviously, she's devastated that they're not getting to go back to Birmingham, back to her hometown to play in the Sweet 16. But she did everything in her power to get them there, really put on an incredible last performance for the Tide.
Yeah.
3 of the most like impressive free throws ever, too. Like at the end,
yes.
I was shook. I was like, there's no way you make all 3. Like I was shook on her behalf, but she was not. So I guess I took her shookness or something. I don't know, but
also
3 of the most impressive free throws.
Yeah. And Brian says none of them touched the rim, so shout out to that.
Cold. Like literally could not have been more consistent. I mean, she's a good free throw shooter. She shoots about 70%, but like that is about as difficult of a free throw as you can possibly get. And 70%, you probably, I mean, a lot of times are missing one of those. So she missed a couple throughout the course of the game, but not those ones.
Yeah.
She said, no, we are not ending this here.
Yeah. And I mean, Maryland definitely like edged that one out, like good for them. And also like shout out Sarah Tibiasu before we move on.
Were you searching for your Canadian flag?
I was. I was doing. So for anybody's watching on video, you saw me kind of going through my drawers here. I was looking for my Canadian flag because I had to for Sarah. She had a big game against Michigan a few weeks ago in the Big Ten tournament. Showed out against in that Alabama game as well. So yeah, that was a good. Is that the first NCAA at least women's tournament that's gone to double overtime? Like, I feel like we need to pull that stat or something because I was like,
this year, yes,
this year,
not ever,
not ever. Okay, yeah, I was wondering that, but anyway, moving on. Tyler, who's your performer of the first 2 rounds?
Look, I got Tamira Poindexter from Kansas State. Look, man. I'm gonna go on a slight little victory lap because this transfer was my favorite transfer in the like. Obviously, you had like some really big names that transferred and whatnot, but like when it came to like the fit and what someone could bring to a team that was like under the radar, Tamira Poindexter going from Tulsa to Kansas State, an Oklahoma kid. So like I've been known, okay, she's a bucket getter, and the way that I thought that she would be kind of producing for Kansas State throughout the entirety of this season and the role is what we saw in this game. Now that changed because Ayoka Lee was hurt, right? So it wasn't just being a natural kind of floor spacer that I kind of had anticipated. But Ayoka Lee's back, and now you get to see it. And she starts this game off slow from 3. Like it was a slow start, and she ends it with 8 of 15 from 3. And this was a game where neither team was missing. Like it literally came down to who missed last. Like, that is what this game came down to. And ultimately, Kentucky was the team to miss last. And it just kind of never really guarded her on the 3-point line. And it was kind of confusing. But also, I was having a good time watching it. So, like, I wasn't really, like, complaining. But, yeah, like, again, this was the floor spacing capabilities is what excited me so much. Next to us, Serena Sundell, like, playing alongside her on the perimeter. They obviously have Ayoka Lee down in the post. Like, And it's kind of been, I don't want to say hit or miss. I mean, she's averaging almost 13 points this season. So not hit or miss, but when you have these kind of blow-up games, like those have kind of just been like kind of coming randomly. I mean, you got some games where it's lower, but when you talk about, having your, probably, I mean, best game of the season, I think, off the top of my head, best game of the season at this time.
Against the top
on the road. Like, in March Madness, like, there was not a better time to have this. And she was an absolute flamethrower from deep in this game. So that's my shout out.
Yeah. I mean, amazing game. And I mean, people are definitely sleeping on K-State coming into the tournament just because of, like we were saying, the way that they performed during the season. But I mean, it was a good game and excited to kind of see how they perform going forward. Again, I think that's kind of the one like sleeper team and that's left in this tournament. But anyway, my player of the weekend is the one and only Paige Beckers, Paige Buckets. She played her last 2 games on Connecticut home court. She's heading out of Connecticut. And I mean, the first game that she played, she only scored 11 points. It wasn't anything phenomenal, but she does what she has to do to get the team the win. In the second game, I think the narrative was a little bit more about this is her last game in Connecticut and a little bit less about she needs to perform like this to win, because ultimately, like, it was UConn versus South Dakota State, like South Dakota State is a very good game, but team, and they kept up for like, the first quarter, and UConn had a slow start, but at the end of the day, like it's going to catch up regardless. But in that game, Paige achieves a 50-40-90 season in terms of shooting. So 50% from the field, 40% from three, 90% from the free throw line. And then also is now leading the NCAA in assist turnover ratio and becomes the only player in the WNBA, NBA, or college basketball to ever do both in the same season.
She's good.
Yeah, she's good. We'll see. We'll see if that translates to the WNBA. But anyway, she just like, to me, encapsulates like a star. Like she is one of those players who has always had such a high basketball IQ. I mean, she was the player of the year as a freshman, not just freshman of the year. She was also that, but she was also the national player of the year as a freshman. She has always been such like a playmaking minded player. She can score. She can assist. She can rebound. She played center once for them when they didn't have any players. And at the end of the day, she's also just like, has always used her NIL opportunities for good, is such a good ambassador for the game, is such a good role model, is a good teammate. I mean, there's a story this week going around about how she's been getting up super early to cook meals for her teammate who is fasting for Ramadan.
Yeah, I love that story about her and Jana El-Alfi. And then they talked about how they already have a buddy signed up for her for next year, too.
For next year, KK Arnold has already signed up. And just like, the fact that she's like waking up and making sure Jana gets up to make sure that she eats before she has to start fasting, and just stuff like that has always proven that Paige is like one of one. And she's going to be such a good ambassador for the WNBA. She's going to be such a good women's basketball icon for years to come. And as much as I was sad watching her like finish in stores, I was like, oh man, like I'm so excited for the future of Paige Bueckers, because she just has often on the court such a bright future ahead of her. And not only that, she can freaking hoop. Like, she can hoop. And another thing is that she paid for over 1,000 students to be able to go to the game last night. She paid for their tickets so they could come and support. So,
gave him a show. Tied her career high. Like, gave him a show.
Did you guys see the clip of Gino, like, watching her walk out of the press conference?
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
bro,
my theory has been that like I would not be at all surprised if he hung it up after this year. With AZ coming back, maybe he gives it this coming year
and
as well.
Sarah Strong being as good as Sarah Strong is, I could see.
Yeah, I feel like it can't be long off at all. I mean, a lot of coaches from kind of the quote unquote old guard are hanging it up because of all the changes. And so like, obviously we have plenty of time in the off season to get into all that, but like that expression, I was just like,
that was like crushing. Seeing old people cry just kind of makes me sad in general. Sorry, Gino.
I was gonna say, Gino ain't never coming out here.
Oh man, they were calling him Grandpa. It's fine. Anyways, but
okay, that doesn't mean much though, because Iowa State was calling their super senior Emily Ryan Grandma the whole season, and I had to sit there like, y'all have to stop doing this around me, please.
Yeah, she's like 22. Like, girl, like let's calm down. But to the point. Shout out Paige. And
there you go.
Yeah, back to the point. And it seemed like a great atmosphere last night in Gamble. And I mean, job's not done. They are headed now to play Oklahoma, which we'll talk about in a sec. And are now kind of the favorites to come out of this region and to make it to the Final Four. Sorry, Tyler. Bye. We'll get into that. But yeah, it's just Paige. Like we're running out of words to be able to describe how good she is. So that's that. But let's head in now to what I'm calling March Sadness, because there's like no good way to segue into this. We're filming this on Tuesday morning. We are fresh from the devastating injury of JuJu Watkins. She tore her right ACL last night in USC's game against Mississippi State. In the first quarter, and it sucks. Like there's no way to like, there's no silver lining, there's no whatever. It sucks. Like it's terrible. It's really sad. And as much as I was just saying like, oh, like as much as it's sad to see Paige play her like stuff like this, there's no at least. Like it's just terrible. And I've spent the whole day like researching knees, which is really random. And it's just like it's becoming a crisis. Like the ACL injury boom is becoming.
Is there anything good that an ACL has ever contributed to society? Because I mean,
so. Other than the ability to walk.
But then you do stuff like this, and I get the question.
Yeah.
I'm still so sick to my stomach about.
Shout out to PCLs, because those apparently aren't doing this.
Not nearly as destructible. But yeah, I mean that last night. I mean that's. I mean, like, what are you? There's no like good way to even like start talking. I mean, it sucks, bro. Like it's and the timing of it is so bad, because like now you're looking at next season as well. Like the potential, like obviously, like there's so much to talk about. I mean, obviously, this is the worst time to have this happen, both for this season and for next. And yeah, I mean, it just sucks, dude. Like I mean, that's you never want to see that for any player, obviously, but especially like what we've been building towards with JuJu Watkins and how we've seen her get up for these big games, right? And now that we're going into the biggest time of the year, like it's just, I was on a live stream when it happened. Like it was like the entire, like, I felt like my soul left my body. Like it was like an out of body experience, like just watching that happen. So best wishes to her. And like, I mean, I know it's easy to kind of talk about like, the impact on viewership, or I have seen like a lot of that dialogue over the course, like just on social media or like that does not matter right now. It doesn't. One, because of JuJu the human, like that's like immediately where my head goes, and two, there's also a whole lot of good basketball players. Like I don't want to put like any like I don't know if blame is the word on JuJu, but that's like kind of like where I feel like that derives from. Like I don't like that at all.
Like I'm just super over like the single-minded narrative when it comes to women's basketball. I think that the idea that the entire sport is on one single person's shoulders has been proved inaccurate. We're still getting great numbers from the NCAA tournament this year without Caitlin Clark. Like she has done a lot to bring attention to the sport. I have recently been accused of hating on Caitlin because I mentioned that other people from the state of Iowa produced at a high level. Not sure I was following the train of logic, but like, that's not my point. My point is that the entire sport is not on one person's shoulders. Not Caitlin Clark's, not Asia Wilson, not Nafisa Collier, not Paige Becker's, not JuJu Watkins. And so for people who can only comprehend one player, only have interest in following one player, sure, that's going to hurt. But overall, women's basketball has developed a following primarily as a result of being an extremely team-oriented game. And so, yeah, maybe it can hurt your wider viewership to some degree, but a lot of that is also on the media and the way that they latch on to single players. And so when you're sitting there and you're authoring these think pieces on, well, this is horrific for the tournament, no one's gonna watch it. Do you stop to think that maybe this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, that you putting this out there into the world is telling people that it's no longer worth watching without JuJu? When you could talk about, wow, the way that her team rallied and the way that they played, frankly, some of their best basketball of the season after she went out, because they looked like a really cohesive unit, because they really locked in, and the way that this could spark a run from them, because guess what? They have tremendous pieces outside of JuJu Watkins. Are they better without her? No, that is not at all what I am saying. Are they still a Final Four caliber team without JuJu Watkins? Especially the way Kiki played the other night. If Kiki's
playing like that.
They sure are. They sure are. So it is a disservice to the game as a whole, to JuJu, to the team, to talk about all of these wide-reaching impacts solely as a result of her being injured. And so that's just what I get so sick of. But the way that the team rallied, the way that they locked in, and the way that Kiki really stepped up to the plate was incredible. I think that her stock, she maybe has been talked about a little bit less this year, but she really stepped up and showed, like, this is who I am, this is what I can do. And so wherever I get taken in that draft, I'm going to make an impact. You can count on that. And she's going to continue making an impact and keep USC going.
Yeah. One of the most frustrating things when something like this happens is like how the media talks about injuries and the injured players and the way that like the injury.
Don't use pictures and clips. Yeah.
Like it's like almost like that. What's it? I'm trying to think of the word. It's not romanticize. It's another word. It's something that they just keep putting it out for clicks. I don't know. The word isn't coming to my mind. But to like frame this in a way that like, first of all, you're just like absolutely blasting pictures of this poor girl in horrific pain. Like that's first terrible. And then you frame it in a way that's like, oh, like imagine the pressure being put on JuJu now to like recover because apparently the whole sport and whatever, the fate of the world is on your recovery. And then to me, the other thing that is like frustrating is that now we're seeing time and time again evidence, and there's now scientific research that backs that women are more likely to tear their ACLs for a wide variety of reasons that have to do with the physiological makeup of female bodies. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. Like there's rarely any research that goes into how to train and treat women's bodies differently and better so that they can perform. There's little to no research about how to prevent ACL injuries in women.
Like we only recently got shoes specifically made for women.
And there's only recently starting to be there's only starting to be research about how like training women based on like the cycles of their like menstrual cycle and how endometriosis plays into athletes and stuff like that. And it's like, we're seeing like, not to use JuJu as like the poster child of ACL injuries, but like we're seeing so many. Like she's not the only one. There's a long list of players: Olivia Miles, Paige Beckers, AZ Fudd, Cameron Brink, Kia Nurse had one.
Like if you're going to use this as something to latch onto, keep that same energy for like calling for progress or calling for changes, calling for better care, and like use it as opposed to just every time this happens sitting there like, I can't believe this happened. This is so sad. Let's make a big deal about it and then forget about them and then use them for this inspiring comeback story. But we don't do anything about the root causes. We don't do anything about the coverage that leads this to spiral out of control afterwards. Like there's more conversations that need to be held outside of it that are not specific to JuJu, but the place that women's basketball is in right now, this is one of the, most consequential injuries we've had and covered because there's so much more attention. And so you got to take the opportunity to discuss these things.
Yeah. And I think this also leads into like a bigger conversation we don't have to get fully into today, but like the amount of women's basketball media energy that goes into trauma stories and like comeback stories and focusing on the negative stuff in players' lives that has fueled them. Because like, sure, the negative stuff in everybody's life fuels them, but like, why is that what we're immediately focusing on? Why, when something happens like this, is it immediately like, oh, when you were injured, like, how did it feel? Or like all of this stuff that it's like, we immediately focus on the negative instead of being like, focusing on different stuff. Like I get that the comeback
psychologically healthy. Like I will say, I think there's a lot of power to sharing struggles publicly. I think that the profile on Lauren Betts and the issues she went through, the bullying she faced growing up, and then just the mental health stuff that she's had while in college was one of the most powerful pieces I've read in a long time. I know that Haley Van Lith has spoken extremely candidly about some of the struggles that she's had over the past couple of years. I know in my own backyard, Emily Ryan was open about the fact that most of what she missed last year was due to an eating disorder. And that obviously has a lot of struggles that come with it. Audie Crooks recently had an article that she talked about some of the bullying that she's received. And so
but it's player forward.
But that's within their own power to. They are part of that conversation. And that is something that's impacting them that they are choosing to talk about that I think can help people, as opposed to just the trauma porn of, we're going to rehash this. You do not get an input on it. You do not get to speak on it. We are going to throw it in your face anytime we can, but we aren't going to sit down and actually like treat this with the care it deserves. And so I would really like to see a greater focus on that moving forward.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that more as the draft comes, because I find the draft is a really, really unique time where that comes up more. Instead of focusing on the achievements of the players, you focus on the challenges.
You find out exactly how many players had brothers that they played against growing up.
Yeah. Or you find out who had someone close to them pass away and like how that whatever. And it's like, why is this what we're latching on? I get the emotional part that you want to latch onto, but at a point it gets to, like Jamie said, trauma porn. Like, let's not. But anyway, that is just like some of the stuff that has come up when we think about this really devastating injury to JuJu Watkins. And of course, we all wish her the best in a speedy recovery and hope that, you know, she has a lot of support around her, because these things are really tough physically, but also mentally.
I'm sure that a lot of players that have gone through that recently will be reaching out. You know, they kind of have that like sorority of players who have dealt with it recently. I mean, you got Rory Harmon, as you mentioned, Olivia Miles, Paige Beckers. I'm sure that they're offering a lot of support behind the scenes, not just, you know,
of course,
stuff out.
Yeah, and I think they're all a lot closer than we think. A lot of these players have played with each other in like AAU and Team USA and
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So they have good relationships, which is really great. And I mean, JuJu's teammates, I mean, they're all very close, and I'm sure they're going to rally behind her as well. So, but this kind of has also led to the inevitability of the fact that USC now is in the Sweet 16. And, you know, we talked a little bit about Kiki stepping up in that game last night. And I think there is a good, you know, reason to say, like, USC's not out. Like, this is not the end of their...
If they got Kiki Iriafen, they're not out. It's really like not to oversimplify it, but like Kiki is that caliber of player, and like I think it's kind of gotten forgotten a little bit. But like you can go back to Stanford times. Anytime that somebody was out, whether it be Cameron Brink with foul trouble, whatever, who stepped up every single time? It was Kiki. And even
confirm.
Yeah, look. Anyway, if anybody knows, you know, like, but even. And Jamie, you kind of alluded to this earlier in the conversation, but like the leadership that Kiki took in that game of like, and it's not like your normal like clapping in people's face, like, you know, motivate. Like it was like joy. Like she was having fun out there. Even like I was on a stream and like I could barely talk about basketball after seeing that happen. I can't imagine being on the team that just happened to on the court in that arena and then having to go play basketball in March Madness and lead my team.
It's
so with the performance that she had.
Like you feel sick to yourself from someone who's like been around for things that happen in games, and that's not even in the postseason. Like, but I think that one of the most striking images I'll take from that game was like at the very end when everyone was getting pulled. At one point they showed like an above shot of her and maybe it was Kaylee Heckle next to her, someone sitting next to her, and she just kind of leaned over and put her head on her shoulder, and like they just kind of patted each other's hands, and it was just like, it was so powerful to be that like people want to say a lot about college athletes, about teams, about individuals that they don't know anything about. And it just showed like the support that they have for each other, the love they have for each other, obviously the love they have for JuJu, that it affected them that strongly, but the way that they rallied together, the way that they were able to maintain focus, like that's a top-down sort of thing to be able to do. Like that is not a guarantee. That is such a mature thing, especially they have so many freshmen that play for them as well.
That's what's so impressive to me.
I thought that was a very powerful image. I thought that it sent a very clear message. I think that it says a lot about, again, Kiki as a leader, JuJu as a leader, because obviously a lot of culture comes from her involvement from the program that Lindsay Gottlieb leads. Like that, I just loved that shot. I loved that image. I'm gonna have to go seek out like a still of it because it made me feel something. I know what you're talking about.
It was. I'm intrigued, and like obviously now you go against the Kansas State team, like just to kind of fully, you know, look ahead with it. It's a very good Kansas State team. I mean, I just talked about earlier, like, you know, like what they're able to do in
the literal opposite situation.
Yeah, like they're back. I mean, because the question coming in with Kansas State was like, okay, Ayoka Lee is saying she's 100%, but you're not really 100% until you play. But now she's played twice and has looked really good. And I was
skeptical.
I think it's interesting because I'm with you. I think what's interesting to me about Kansas State, because immediately you think, okay, what other bigs have USC played? I can think of a pretty good one that they played a couple times in Lauren Betts, right? But I think, and it's a little weird, But I think that there's potential for Kansas State to even like if like USC was completely healthy. I think they have a little bit. They could provide even a more of a challenge because you have your Ayoka Lee minutes and you have your non-Ayoka Lee minutes, and those are two different teams for Kansas State and that they switch from very seamlessly. UCLA is very, very, very good, but they're Lauren Betts. Like that's
they
Lauren
play
Betts'
a style,
team. And they don't really like you have like different players that can have really good games, but you don't really pivot from that style. Kansas State has two very distinct styles that they're able to play. And so now, if you're from a USC perspective, I think you feel good about your potential of guarding Ayoka Lee from what you saw with Lauren Betts. But I also think part of that comes down to the ball pressure you're able to get on UCLA's guards in those games. And now without JuJu Watkins, Kennedy Smith has so much on her plate on the perimeter defensively. And as I just mentioned, they got some shooters at Kansas State. And you got a Serena Sundell at Kansas State who's very, very good. So on one hand, like Kansas State is a very good team that even with JuJu, I think could have beat USC because I think now that they're back healthy and playing their best, is a phenomenal basketball team. But Kiki Iriafin is one of the best players in the nation, and that has gone under the radar. And USC is a number one seed not only because of JuJu Watkins. They have some phenomenal players around that are able to now step up into different roles. Atelia von Oelhoffen, all the freshmen. There is now this obviously this void, but USC has players that can fill the void. They have the talent. Obviously, it's a huge ask to now do in March, not at home. You're on a neutral court against Kansas State. It's a massive ask, but I just it does not feel right to just be like, okay, Kansas State, forget USC, UConn, like. That is not the case here at all in my eyes. So I feel like there's
a lot of people that either think, oh, well, K-State's got to be his JuJu's out, or, oh, K-State has no chance because they're K-State. And, like, the truth is certainly somewhere in the middle, especially you also have to account for the fact that Kansas State has such experienced perimeter players.
Yes.
Like, they are an old team. Well, they have experienced all players. Ayoka's in her second year. And, you know, Serena... She super underrated, legitimately 6'2" point guard. And so not having JuJu to be able to guard her is definitely going to be a struggle. I think the interesting thing will be that you are going to have, I think, some significant minutes with potentially Kiki having to guard Tamara Poindexter out of the perimeter or potentially helping in on Ayoka Lee. I don't know that there's like a perfect one-on-one matchup, but then on the other end, someone's going to have to guard Kiki. They obviously have had really great defensive contributions from Raya and from Clarissa Kunwufo against like Lauren Betts, and so I think that they'll be able to handle Ayoka pretty well, but they do pass very well into her, and so if you're not sending a double, it's definitely a little bit of a challenge. So I'm very intrigued because of all the things you said where this is, in a lot of ways, I think, a very similar matchup to UCLA. I think there's a little bit less of the interior depth. I think that the players that play the four are not quite true fours. They're more perimeter oriented. And then they do have the ability to really speed up the game when Ayoka's out because they can go a little bit of small ball. Kennedy, oh my goodness, I'm completely losing her name. No, this is for K-State.
Oh, for K-State.
Their backup five is runs the floor incredibly well, and so that is certainly a really big boost for them as well.
Kennedy Taylor.
Thank you, Kennedy
I was
Taylor.
just googling it.
And
shout out Kennedy Taylor.
I knew someone would have me because I couldn't both Google and continue to speak at the same time.
Worry about it. We got
but yeah, no, Kennedy Taylor runs the court like crazy, and so I definitely think the two styles is going to be really interesting. I couldn't really be surprised with an outcome of that game, to be completely honest, because there's just so much up in the air.
I'm
and I mean, on that note of looking ahead to other teams, we've also each picked another matchup other than USC to preview going into the Sweet 16, what we think is going to be either the outcome or the big stories or the impact or whatever. So let's hop to Tyler because he's going to be get on his homer bag for a minute.
Yeah, I'll get on my really unbiased. Look, Oklahoma's in the Sweet 16 for the first time in over a decade.
And they just got the #1 recruit like an hour ago.
Hey, man. This many good things in a row has never happened to the state of Oklahoma. Okay. This is what a time. What a time. But look, it's no secret who's coming next. Okay. So I think I'm going to assume that most people are pretty familiar with the UConn Huskies and who they have. So let me give you the Oklahoma POV of this. I'll tell you where I think things could potentially get interesting here. And that is Skylar Vann is back to playing Big 12 Player of the Year, Skylar Vann basketball. Mm-hmm. And these two games, the statistics have not been what I anticipated, frankly, this season from Skylar Vann. And I actually had her in my preseason SEC vote. I had her on second team because of this weekend. Like what we saw this weekend is what I thought would be more kind of consistent throughout the season. But she provides such a perfect fit as the 4 next to Reagan Beers. And I think that there's honestly I don't know directly how UConn can cover that if both are producing in the way that they were this weekend. Now, can they certainly does it take Oklahoma's best in this? I do think so. But you look at Sarah Strong, obviously dominant inside and out. But Skylar Vann can step out to the perimeter as a big and can defend the perimeter while also being a big enough body down low where you're not just going to get totally bodied in that way. And then obviously Reagan Beers is also down there for a lot of the time. So I'm interested in the two big lineups that Oklahoma has really turned to this season with the addition of Reagan Beers and even Liz Scott coming off the bench as well. Beatrice Colleton coming off the bench as well. There's been a lot of two big lineups. And so if you have that where you have bigs contributing and you're not turning the ball over, because that's what changed the game in the Iowa game, is that early Iowa got like 5 points off turnovers. And then in the span of Oklahoma really building their lead, they only got 2 more points off turnovers. They ended up getting some more late in the game when OU was just kind of – the game was in the bag, frankly, at that point. But if OU can play clean, and certainly if they can hit the 3 ball, if the bigs keep playing the way that they have, there's a legitimate – puncher's chance here in this game. I'm not going to go and say, oh, they're going to be UConn. I'm not doing any of that. So, I'm just simply putting some eye emojis on. I'll put it like this. I see the road. I see the road where they could travel down and go and win this game. Now, UConn might have a highway of routes to win this game. Okay? But I'm just enjoying it while I can. I don't want to say I'm happy to be here, but I'm just happy to be here. And the fact that Oklahoma's in the Sweet 16. Again, this is an Oklahoma team. I have yet to see under Jenny Baranczyk a team look so prepared for March than this one. Because, if you go back in the years, it's been tough losses in the first 2 rounds of March. But you get past the Sweet 16, you make it to your first regional under Jenny Baranczyk, your first regional in over a decade for Oklahoma, and you're playing some of your best basketball. I think that this is a matchup that I think people are going to overlook and probably have been overlooking because everyone wanted to see USC UConn. Everyone wanted to see JuJu Page in the build-up to this. And I think that these 2 matches, both of them, the one we just talked about with Kansas State USC and this one, have been kind of overlooked. I'm intrigued. I'll put some small eye emojis on this one, and I'll leave it at that.
There you go. The one I'm looking forward to is definitely a game that has a team that I was really shocked by yesterday, which is LSU playing NC State. And I think that one's going to be so interesting just because there were so many concerns with LSU coming into this tournament about injuries to both Anissa Morrow and to Flau'jae Johnson. And you couldn't tell last night. Like, they were absolutely just like running their offense. They were absolutely smothering on offense. They like Florida State stayed in it for the first half, and then LSU just absolutely bulldozed them in the second half, and it got away from Florida State. Like, don't get me wrong, Florida State is a great team. I definitely thought that they had a chance to win that game. Injury concerns were in mind, but LSU was we need to remind people of who we are. And it was funny because after the game, Flaugier even said, like, I saw what UConn and Page did the other day to Arkansas State, and I was like, ooh, that's what I need to do. And that's what they did. And then you have NC State, on the other hand, who has Isaiah James and Sanaya Rivers, who have been playing phenomenally over the past month and a bit. And they did have that little, weak point in the ACC final, but I mean, to recover well from that and to make the Sweet 16 now, they made the Final Four last year. Isaiah James is playing absolutely phenomenally. Sanaya Rivers is kind of the anchor and the glue to this team, leading them. I think it's going to be a really, really good game, and I think
they're stroking it from 3.
Yep,
15-30.
Yep,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not normal. That's not normal.
No, and I mean, LSU was also scoring like shot after shot last night, and like
if LSU gets that level of Samaya Smith production, there's not many teams that can match 4 LSU players, like, because that's always kind of been the thing with LSU is like if they just get one more player, whether it be a Kaylin Gilbert off the bench or again Samaya Smith like that, they get one more player on top of that big 3 producing them, and they're producing that normal. Not many teams are going to be able to.
Because it doesn't feel like a big ask with like the caliber of players they have around them. It's just about like when they get the right matchup, when they get the right flow.
Yeah, and I think NC State is a really interesting opportunity. You also have Cheyenne Day Wilson. Got to shout out her. But who also is a very veteran player for LSU. And I mean, just like in a lot of teams when you lose a star as big as Angel Reese, there's always like they're not going to be able to blah, 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 blah. But despite the fact that LSU usually schedules themselves a pretty, like, not very strong non-conference, they did pretty well in the SEC, other than a few losses. But they are looking like the best they've looked all year right now. And that last night's game was, because of that. And I do think that they play with a chip on their shoulder, which, can benefit you or also kind of end up being what brings you down. But NC State LSU is definitely one that I'm going to be, again, eye emoji on.
There you go.
For Sweet 16. Jamie, what's your Sweet 16 matchup eye emoji moment?
I'm really looking at the TCU Notre Dame rubber match. We've got a couple rematches coming up, and I think that the TCU Notre Dame one, especially considering that basically no one was able to see it because of the way that things are broadcast on Thanksgiving, is certainly really
okay. Let's be honest. If it happened on Thanksgiving week, did it happen? Like, are we actually?
It truly came from like a different dimension. So. I think that there will be a lot of people who are surprised that this is a rematch. This is a game that TCU won by 8 after outscoring Notre Dame in the fourth quarter, 31-12. So, let off the gas a little bit. Notre Dame still didn't have quite all of their depth pieces back. Really tough game for Kate Koval, fouled out without making a point. And especially, obviously, that was, I think, probably her first big challenge against like a true large center. And so Liatu King being a little bit undersized was a tough one for her. And just still had several people out for injury that they since have returned. So I think that Notre Dame has certainly played like a team with something to prove so far in this NCAA tournament. Seen it. I will say, I got to give a quick shout out to my new friend, Bill Citron.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
Who was hanging out in the hotel lobby of Iowa State's hotel. I think he was staying in the same hotel. He's just chilling when we're about to do our send-off. He's asking me what time they're leaving. He's like, yeah, my daughter plays for Notre Dame. I just like all the postseason stuff. And I'm like, what? Who's your daughter? And I was not prepared for the words out of his mouth to be Sonia Citron. But had a quick 30-second chat there. Yes. I mean, dude loves ball. So...
Which
sick. Already was a big fan of Sonia's game, and then you meet her like 6'4", 6'5" dad hanging out and just like lover of the game. I'm like, okay, I see it. okay, I see it where he's like, yeah, you know, she's the youngest of 5, and so this is kind of the last go around for us. I'm like, okay, I love it. So no, but I mean, they definitely have been playing with some new energy here, and I think these are 2 teams with a lot to prove, because TCU still gets overlooked, and especially you get a lot of talk about Sonoma Prince, about Haley Van Lith, but really their tremendous strength down the stretch has been getting consistent production outside of them. I think Madison Connor is one of the most underrated players remaining in the tournament for what she brings to the table. And then you have some major players such as Agnes Eminopu, Taylor Bigby, Donovan Hunter, all of them reliable to go off at any given time. And so they are definitely a really big challenge offensively. So really interested to see what comes out of that one. I think that either way, it's going to be a tremendous game. Again, one that I think it's really hard to predict. TCU really likes to slow the game down. Notre Dame would love to get going fast. So I think a lot of it comes down to decision making on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. And when you were talking about Sonia's dad, it made me think of another fun little family anecdote on the broadcast last night, which was Kiki Iriafin's grandparents coming to watch her game and talking about how she's finishing her college career, and her grandpa asks her, so are you gonna go like get a job now, like a real job? And she was like, Grandpa, like basketball's the job, like I'm gonna go play basketball.
The answer's still yes.
Yeah, she's gonna get a job.
Yeah, he's gonna get a job, I promise you.
Not the job that he was probably expecting her to get.
I ain't gonna have a desk, but
yeah, man, and that just like made me laugh, because it's like in the end, every grandparent is the same. They just want us to go get a job, and I wish I had the ability to pull a Kiki and just say like, yeah, I'm just gonna go play basketball. That's my job. But yeah, that was funny and a really like sweet family moment. So I mean, who knows? Maybe Sonia's gonna end up somewhere, and we're gonna get some fun WNBA dad moments from our new friend of the podcast, Bill.
I'd love it. I know that we have some Notre Dame family listeners, so shout out to all of y'all. So
we love a good family lister.
All right.
Yes.
Tyler's like, yeah.
I knew that. Yeah. Shout out Notre Dame. Besides the mascot, me and him got beef still. But, you know.
The mascot? At least he's not the Stanford one. That one just creeps me out.
No, I actually took a selfie with the Stanford one last year in elevator.
Oh, the tree, but it's like not even just a tree; it's a creepy tree.
It's the person inside, like staring right at you.
Yeah. Anyways, mascots a whole thing. We need to get Mark Schindler on the show and talk about mascots. The guy hates mascots.
That's some prime off-season content.
Yeah, seriously, right? But yeah,
beware. Mark and I have never done a pod under an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm out that day. Sorry, I'm sick in advance. I'm on IR. Sorry.
Yeah, IR. Oh man, I mean,
careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for. Literally, the plague will come back to this podcast again. But anyway, that's I guess all we have. The Sweet 16 Elite Eight's coming up this weekend. We'll be back next week to recap it all and talk about the Final Four. It's getting wild up in here. It's under the wire. There's happy, there's sad, there's everything in between. And I mean, that's March. So thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it, especially as there's so much March Madness content to consume these days. So we definitely appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to us talk nonsense. But make sure to check out Her Hoop Stats and all of the other wonderful podcasts and articles and analysis that is going down over on our network. Subscribe here, subscribe where you're listening, and follow the three of us on social media, because again, we like to yap. And yeah, so for that, we will see you next week for the Press Break podcast. Bye.